Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to share a story that really resonated with me. A powerful reminder that you should never, ever judge a book by its cover. It's about a man named Richard Hawley, who at 70 years old, understood that sometimes silence speaks volumes. But there was one day, one moment, where even silence felt too small to hold the weight of what he felt. It all started when Richard went to meet his daughter Emily's fiancé, Brandon. Richard, a man who once owned one of the biggest construction companies in the county, was now living a much simpler life. He'd sacrificed everything, every penny, to pay for his late wife, Margaret's treatments. He didn't regret it for a second. She was his world. After she passed, he lost more than just his savings. He lost his drive for money, retired early, hoping to spend more time with Emily. But life, as it often does, took a different turn, and Emily grew distant. Richard, proud yet alone, still held on to hope. When Emily invited him to meet Brandon, he saw it as a chance to reconnect. He put on his cleanest clothes, polished his old shoes, even borrowed a tie. He wanted to make her proud. But Brandon was different. Young, sharp-dressed, and oozing arrogance. The first thing he said when he saw Richard in front of Emily's friends was, "Oh, Emily, you didn't tell me your dad was local. He looks like one of those homeless folks downtown." The laughter that followed, the way Emily looked down, embarrassed. It hit Richard hard, not the insult itself, but Emily's silence. He smiled anyway, because what else can an old man do? But inside, a quiet promise was made, not one of anger, but of truth. He'd show Brandon who he really was. He sat through dinner, listening to Brandon boast about future plans, about how Emily would move into his luxury condo, about selling Emily's late mother's house, the house Richard had built with his own hands. Every word was a twist of the knife, but Richard stayed silent, observing, memorizing every careless remark. When the evening ended, Brandon's handshake was fake, his eyes dismissive. He looked at Richard like something stuck to his shoe. That night, driving back to his small trailer, under a sky full of stars, a calm idea began to form. Not rage, not bitterness, just a plan. The next morning, waking before dawn, the cold seeping through his trailer walls didn't bother him. He thought about Brandon's cruel comment, seeing an old man with worn shoes and calling him homeless. But Brandon didn't see the man who built half the homes in that town. He didn't see Hawley construction stamped on beams, foundations, and blueprints worth millions. He didn't see the quiet investments, the land titles tucked safely away. You see, Brandon, and even Emily, had forgotten that appearances can be deceiving. And Brandon was about to find out that the local homeless person he mocked still owned the very land his dream home was built upon. What a powerful story about resilience, misplaced pride, and the quiet strength of a man underestimated. You know, life has a funny way of teaching you lessons. And sometimes, those lessons come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. This one, well, it involved my daughter, her fiancé, and a truth I knew they both needed to see. It all started after Margaret, my beloved wife, passed away. The world felt a little emptier, but I had to keep going. I'd sold the company we built together, thinking I was streamlining things, simplifying, but I didn't sell everything. I held on to three particular things: a cozy cabin nestled by the lake, a sizable, undeveloped plot of land near the bustling city, and, most importantly, the house where our daughter, Emily, had grown up. The very house Brandon, her fiancé, seemed so eager to sell. What nobody, and I mean nobody, knew was a little secret I'd set in motion years ago. After Margaret and I talked about the future, I'd transferred all those assets, the cabin, the land, the house, into a private trust. Emily was the sole beneficiary, but with a condition. She wouldn't gain full access until her 30th birthday. And Brandon, well, his name wasn't on any paper that truly mattered. Not a single one. That's why his arrogance, his smug certainty that he already controlled Emily's life, her comfort, her future, her very home, it stung a little. But it mostly amused me. He was so confident, thinking he'd charmed his way into an easy life, a secure future. He thought he had me, the simple old man, wrapped around his finger. But I'd learned a long time ago, through years of business and life, that greed is a patient predator. It always exposes itself before it utterly destroys itself. You just have to wait. Sometimes, folks, the best revenge isn't about immediate retaliation. It's patience, cleverly disguised as weakness. A few days after one of Brandon's particularly galling comments, Emily called. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Dad," she began. "Brandon didn't mean to insult you. He has a weird sense of humor." I smiled then, a small, knowing smile, even though she couldn't see it. "Emily," I said gently, trying to impart a lifetime of wisdom in a single sentence. "A man's humor shows what's truly in his heart. Don't excuse it, honey. Notice it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her processing my words. Then, with a sigh, she quickly changed the subject. Anyway, Dad, Brandon and I are having an engagement dinner next weekend. He'd really like you to come. Of course he would. My mind immediately pictured his motive. He'd want to parade me around again. The old, simple father figure who would perfectly highlight just how far he, Brandon, had climbed the social ladder. My first instinct was to flat out refuse. Why subject myself to that? But then, Margaret's words, spoken just a week before she left us, echoed in my memory. They were a powerful whisper from the past. Richard, never run from disrespect. Stand tall and let the truth do the talking. So, taking a deep breath, I swallowed my pride and said yes. That week, I found myself going through a ritual. I carefully cleaned my best jacket, ironed my crispest shirt, and meticulously polished the very same pair of shoes that Brandon had once mocked. Each action was deliberate, a quiet preparation for the confrontation I sensed was coming. I even took a detour to the old storage unit, where I kept a few boxers' old company files, important contracts, and something else, something very special. It was an unopened envelope, clearly marked confidential. Inside, sealed by my lawyer years ago, was the trust deed, bearing my signature and Emily's name. I took it with me, not because I planned to unveil it immediately, oh no, but because I had this gut feeling, deep down, that the time for truth was drawing near. You see, the old often keep memories, but the wise always keep proof. The night of the dinner arrived, and I made sure to be early. Brandon's family lived in a truly grand house, the kind you see in magazines. Glass walls, imposing stone pillars. A driveway so vast you could park 10 cars with room to spare. Everything about it screamed wealth, but for all its grandeur, it lacked warmth. As primera wale que din, people greeted me politely, their smiles tight and hollow. I could feel their eyes on me, their unspoken question. What's asterisk? He asterisk doing here? Some even glanced at my coat, as if it didn't quite belong in their shiny, polished world. Then, Brandon appeared, all confidence, all charm, like a character stepping off a screen. He strode the over a brilliant smile placid on his face, handed me a glass of champagne, and said, "Good to see you again, Richard. You clean up well." I met his gaze, my own smile equally pleasant. "And you, Brandon, still mistake kindness for weakness." His grin faltered, just for a split second, a tiny crack in his perfect facade, before he smoothly turned to entertain someone else. Ah, yes. That was the first crack in his mask. The proud, you see, always break first. You just have to give them a mirror. Dinner was a lavish affair. Silver cutlery gleamed under the soft lights. Imported wine flowed freely, and dishes with names I couldn't even pronounce were served with an air of theatricality. I sat quietly at the end of the long table, observing. Brandon, naturally, was the star of his own show, boasting about his latest business ventures, his collection of luxury cars, and, with particular relish, a property deal he was about to close. He mentioned a specific piece of land near the city, describing it as if it were already his, a done deal. My land. "Once the papers are finalized," he declared, his voice ringing with self-importance, "I'll turn that entire area into a luxury complex. It's an easy win, truly." I couldn't help but chuckle softly, a small, almost inaudible sound. "Luxury complex, you say?" I prompted, feigning mild curiosity. "Yeah," he smirked, oblivious. "Some old guy's been sitting on that land for years, doesn't even use it. It's high time someone put it to good use." My fork, halfway to my mouth, froze. The table erupted in laughter with him, completely unaware that the old guy he so casually mocked was sitting just 3 seats away, quietly holding the original deed to that very land in his jacket pocket. He was planning to steal from a ghost, not realizing, not even suspecting, that the ghost still held the keys. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I raised my glass, meeting his gaze with a serene smile. "Well," I said, my voice calm, "may your business flourish, Brandon, and your conscience stay light." The irony, of course, flew completely over his head. After dinner, as people mingled outside around a roaring fire pit, Brandon's father, a man who exuded an air of inherited authority, approached me. "Richard," he began, his tone dripping with that familiar patronizing air that rich men often reserve for those they deem less fortunate. "Brandon tells us you're retired." "That's right," I replied calmly, taking a slow sip of my drink. He nodded, swirling his wine thoughtfully. "Must be tough, living out there by the lake. Ever think about selling that place? Could get you a nice sum, I imagine." I smiled again, a small, knowing smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "No, "Sir," I answered, my voice steady. "That lake still has something left to teach me." What I didn't tell him, what neither of them knew, was that the land around that lake, the very same land Brandon was so eager to develop, was part of that trust. Brandon thought he was negotiating with a stranger. I made the obstacle. In truth, he was trying to buy directly from his own fiancé's inheritance. Greed always digs its own grave. I just made sure he had a shovel. The story isn't over yet, but I hope this glimpse into the importance of patience and seeing beyond appearances resonates with you all. What are your thoughts on Brandon's arrogance? Have you ever had to wait for the truth to reveal itself? And how sometimes the biggest lessons come from the most unexpected places. Grab a coffee, because this one's a journey. So, picture this. I'm sitting alone in my kitchen, late at night. The house is quiet, and the only light is the moon streaming through the window, hitting an envelope I'm holding. It had been quite a day, filled with veiled insults and condescension from my future son-in-law. Brandon, he thought power was all about fancy cars and thick wallets. But as that moonlight illuminated the paper, a different kind of truth settled over me. Real power, the kind that truly matters, isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, it's steady, and it's absolutely unshakable. It's built on foundations, not just facades. That night, I wrote a letter to my lawyer. Just a simple note that read, "It's time to activate the trust. Please schedule the disclosure for Emily's engagement celebration." And honestly, I slept better than I had in years. The thought of it, the next time someone dared to call me homeless, I'd be handing them the deed to their own illusions. It was a sweet, peaceful thought. Fast forward a few days. It's 3 days before the engagement party. I'm driving into town to pick up a gift for Emily, a fresh shirt, and frankly, a quiet smile that I hadn't worn in a very long time. The snow had started falling early that year, tiny, delicate flakes catching the morning light. As I passed the familiar buildings, the old hardware store, the diner where I'd had countless breakfasts, I couldn't help but notice something. People still nodded at me, respectfully. They hadn't forgotten who I was, even if Brandon and his polished friends had. You see, I'd built half this town's foundations with my own hands. Those walls might not have my name plastered on them anymore, but they still stood firm, thanks to my efforts. The world forgets names fast, that's true, but it never forgets who built its bones. There's a silent recognition in places like this, a deep understanding of what truly holds things up. Later that night, Emily called again. Her voice had that familiar, nervous tremor. "Dad," she began, "Brandon just wants to make sure you're comfortable during the party. He asked if you'd rather sit near the back, away from the press photographers." I chuckled softly, a little sadly. "The back? Huh?" I asked. "Is that where the fathers who built the bride's childhood home sit now?" There was a long pause on the line. Then, she whispered, "Dad, please don't make this hard. Whose doesn't he want attention?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew exactly what she meant. He didn't want me to get attention. He didn't want a man he'd so carelessly mocked as homeless to be seen anywhere near the carefully curated, polished image he was trying to sell to his high society friends and business associates. It was a stark moment of realization. Sometimes, the deepest shame doesn't come from what people say about you directly. It comes from the quiet ways the people you love, the people you raised, try to hide you. It was a heavy truth to carry, but it only strengthened my resolve. The day of the engagement party arrived, wrapped in a cold, silver light. The mansion was buzzing, a hive of activity. Guests swirled around. Photographers flashed, relatives mingled, and Brandon's business partners held court. It was the kind of crowd that measures your worth by the cut of your suit, the label on your shoes, the size of your bank account. And me, I wore the same dark coat I'd worn for 20 years. The one Margaret, my late wife, once said, made me look distinguished. And that, to me, was more than good enough. It held memories, love, and a quiet dignity that no designer label could buy. As I entered the grand hall, heads turned, not in admiration, but in assessment. You could almost hear the silent question running through their minds. Who let him? I just smiled anyway, shaking a few hands, nodding politely to familiar faces. Across the room, I spotted Emily in a beautiful ivory dress. She looked radiant, but also undeniably nervous. When she saw me, her eyes softened for a moment. For just a flicker, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and incredible stories about imaginary castles. I gave her a small, reassuring nod, and she smiled through unshed tears. It's funny, isn't it? Even grown children still look for their father's approval, especially when they're about to step into someone else's world, a world that might not truly see them for who they are. Then, the speeches began. Brandon's father spoke first, a booming voice, toasting his brilliant son and the beautiful young woman who had brought light into their family. He made absolutely no mention of me, of my part in raising that beautiful young woman. It was a subtle but undeniable omission. When it was Brandon's turn, He took the mic. Charming as ever, his smile wide and practiced. "You know," he began, "when I first met Emily's dad, I didn't realize who he was. He looked so humble. I honestly thought he was just one of the locals near the construction site." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few guests glanced my way, unsure whether to laugh along or stay silent. I sat still, a faint smile playing on my lips, because what they didn't realize was that single, dismissive comment had sealed his fate. Every insult, every slight, has an echo. It just takes time, and the right moment, for it to come back around. Brandon, completely oblivious, continued. "But then I learned he's a good man, raised a wonderful daughter, and that's all that matters." He finished with a fake grin and a clink of his glass. Everyone clapped. Everyone. That is, except me. I waited until the applause faded completely. Then, quietly, steadily, I stood up. The room, still buzzing from Brandon's speech, slowly quieted as my presence registered. "Brandon," I said, my voice steady, clear, cutting through the lingering hum. "Thank you for the kind words." The room fell silent. Even the soft background music, which had been playing throughout the evening, seemed to pause. All eyes were on me. "But since you brought up construction," I added, a polite, almost serene smile on my face, "perhaps at S-time we all knew who Rudy Asterisk owns the land your company has been eyeing for months." Brandon, who had been basking in the afterglow of his speech, froze. His father, sitting beside him, frowned, a look of confusion and irritation crossing his face. "What are you talking about, Richard?" he demanded, a note of warning in his voice. I reached into the inner pocket of my old, distinguished coat and took out a folded envelope. The very same envelope the moonlight had illuminated in my kitchen. With deliberate slowness, I placed it on the pristine white tablecloth. "This," I said, my voice resonating with a quiet authority that commanded attention, "is the trust deed to the Hele property, the very one your son has been negotiating to buy for months. And that, my friends, is where the story truly begins to turn." What do you think happened next? Have you ever had a moment where true power shone through in the most unexpected way? Let me know in the comments below. It's a tale about arrogance, hidden power, and a truth that hits harder than any punch. Imagine this: a lavish party, tension in the air, and a young hotshot named Brandon, basking in what he believes is his moment of triumph. He's just secured the land for his dream project, a deal he's been bragging about for months, and standing across from him, Richard, a quiet man, seemingly unassuming. Someone Brandon had even dismissed as a local homeless person earlier that night. The room is buzzing with excitement. But then, a sudden hush. Richard.com as a lake at dawn delivers a bombshell that shatters Brandon's smug confidence. "That can't be true," Brandon stammered, his face draining of color. But Richard simply smiles, a soft, knowing smile. "Oh, it's very true. You see, the man you called a local homeless person still owns the ground your dreams are built on. Can you feel that?" That moment, when arrogance collides with an undeniable truth, the silence that followed was deafening, a silence that spoke volumes more than any shout ever could. It was worth every single year Richard had kept his secret, every quiet moment he'd endured. Brandon, desperate to regain control, tried to laugh it off. A hollow, forced sound. "You must be mistaken, Richard. The deal's already in motion, my lawyers confirmed." But Richard, unwavering, cuts him off. "Your lawyers, Brandon, we're speaking to a representative of my trust, the owner you've been so eager to meet. He's been me all along." Whispers erupted through the hall. Emily, Brandon's fiancé and Rich's daughter, looked on, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. Brandon's father, a man usually composed, looked as if the very ground beneath him had just vanished. "But that's impossible," Brandon said, his voice barely a whisper. "You live in a trailer by the lake." And Richard, with a gentle nod, delivered a powerful lesson that pierced through the opulent room. "Yes, I do. Because comfort doesn't need mansions. Son, some of us find peace in quiet places and power in patience." Wow, just imagine that scene. The humble rising and the proud crumbling without even a touch. For a few agonizing seconds, no one dared to speak. The only sounds were the faint, comforting crackle of the fireplace and the rhythmic tap of Richard S. Kane on the polished marble floor as he took a deliberate step forward. Then, a new revelation. Richard reached into his coat pocket and, with profound tenderness, handed another sealed envelope to Emily. "This," he said softly, "is my gift to you, sweetheart. It's the trust transfer confirmation. You'll inherit everything your mother and I built. When you turn 30, the land, the accounts, everything. No one can touch it until then." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Dad, I didn't know." Richard's gaze was full of love. "I know you didn't. And that's okay. You weren't supposed to. But you need to know this. Love shouldn't be measured by what someone owns. Because once greed enters a heart, it leaves no room for anything else. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? The cruel chase wealth, but the truly wise protect hearts. Brandon stood there, his perfect facade cracking, revealing the raw entitlement beneath. His father, flustered, attempted to interject, muttering about misunderstandings and legal confusion. But it was far too late. The truth, like a powerful current, had already swept through the room. And truth, my friends, never waits for permission to make its presence known. Richard then turned to the astonished crowd, his voice calm, yet resonating with an undeniable authority. I may not wear expensive suits or drive luxury cars, but the next time someone decides to call a man like me homeless, remember this. Some of us just choose to live far away from the noise and with that. He gently placed his glass on the table, shared a quiet, knowing nod with his daughter, and began his graceful exit. You do always need to raise your voice when your truth is loud enough to echo through the very walls. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter had begun to fall, dusting Richard's shoulders, melting slowly against his coat. He inhaled the crisp, cold night air, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. Behind him, the laughter had ceased. The music had fallen silent, and Richard knew, deep down, that somewhere within that profound silence, Brandon's world was beginning to unravel. Not because Richard had actively sought to ruin it, but because Brandon had built his entire world on the fragile foundation of his own arrogance. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? Revenge. Dorson. They always roar. Sometimes, it simply walks quietly out the door, leaving karma to finish the job. But the story doesn't end there. Let's shift perspectives for a moment. This very same Richard, who the story refers to, is actually George. And George didn't drive home that evening. He walked. The old man's shoes softly scuffed against the wet sidewalk, the city lights shimmering in the puddles, reflecting his quiet strength. Every step he took felt like a memory. Every reflection a gentle reminder of the countless people he had helped build empires. The towering buildings that had risen from his meticulous blueprints. The thriving companies that still sent him dividend checks he never even bothered to cash. To the casual observer, George might have appeared to be nothing more than a lonely old man, dressed in worn clothes, with kind, gentle eyes. But beneath that unassuming exterior lived a man who had once shaped skylines and forged legacies. A man whose name, though unadvertised, was still etched into the very foundations of things others now took for granted. It's a profound truth, isn't it? Sometimes, the richest man in the room is the one no one even notices. That very night, George sat in his modest study, surrounded not by luxury, but by wooden shelves lined with framed certificates and faded photographs, each one a tangible reminder of a time when his handshake carried weight in boardrooms across the country. He gazed at a picture of his late wife, Margaret, a faint, tender smile gracing his lips. You'd probably laugh at all this, he whispered softly, his voice tinged with both sorrow and a touch of amusement. Imagine, your little girl marrying a man who thinks I'm beneath him. He chuckled, a bittersweet sound. He then poured himself a simple glass of water and pulled a single, elegant letter from a drawer. It was an invitation, an exclusive charity gala, hosted by one of his oldest and most esteemed business partners, Henry Lawson. This event was a gathering of the elite, top industrialists, influential philanthropists, city leaders, precisely the kind of people George used to meet with weekly, before he quietly retired to embrace a simpler, more meaningful life. He hadn't planned to attend, until now. The man they had so carelessly mocked, as homeless, was about to re-enter a world they didn't even realize he still owned. Fast forward 3 days. The gala hall sparkled with an almost ethereal glow, like a diamond brought to life. Chandeliers cast golden light, violins hummed a sophisticated melody, and hushed conversations revolved around deals, vast fortunes and ancient family names. And then, George entered, heads turned, not because he sought fame or attention, but because of his inherent grace. A quiet dignity that commanded respect. He wore an old tuxedo, perfectly tailored, that didn't scream wealth, but subtly projected an aura of undeniable authority. Across the room, Henry spotted him. His face lit up with genuine delight, and he practically rushed over to greet George. "George, I thought you were off in the mountains or something." "Everyone's been asking about you," Henry exclaimed, shaking George's hand warmly, his admiration palpable. George offered a gentle smile. "I prefer quiet places these days, but..." He paused, his eyes holding a depth of wisdom. "I needed to step out for family matters." And in that moment, when old power, true, understated power, returns to the spotlight, even silence speaks louder than the most thunderous applause. What an incredible story, right? It just goes to show that true wealth, true power, And true wisdom often hide in plain sight. It's not about what you display, but what you truly possess in character and conviction. Never underestimate anyone, and always remember that patience can be the most powerful tool of all. It's a powerful tale about humility, arrogance, and the kind of wisdom that truly commands respect. Get ready, because this one is a real eye-opener. Our story begins at a lavish gala. Imagine a room buzzing with influential figures. Old money, new money, business titans, and ambitious up and amidst this glittering crowd, one man stood out, not for his flashy suit, but for the quiet respect he commanded. This was George Whitmore. If that name sounds familiar, it's because George was a legend in his own right. Known for his almost mythical ability to transform failing companies into national powerhouses, he was enjoying the evening, reconnecting with old friends, former employees, investors, even a few journalists who still remembered his Midas touch. But the night took an unexpected turn when two new faces walked in. George's daughter, Emily, and her fiancé, Nathan. Now, Emily and Nathan weren't there for the usual schmoozing. They were on a mission. A desperate one, actually. They needed to secure investment from the Host S company for Nathan Est, Father Est real estate firm. Nathan Everett, the showman, immediately began working the room, strutting around, shaking hands like he owned the place, radiating an almost palpable sense of self-importance. Emily, however, moved more quietly, her eyes scanning the crowd, perhaps a little overwhelmed by the opulence. Then, her gaze landed on George, her father. She froze. Her breath hitched, a look of utter confusion clouding her face. It was as if she'd seen a ghost, or perhaps someone she never expected to find in such an esteemed setting. Nathan, ever observant of her reactions, followed her line of sight. He saw George. A dismissive, almost sneering laugh escaped his lips. What's he doing here? Did he sneak in for free food? He whispered to Emily, his tone dripping with condescension. Emily didn't reply. She couldn't. Something about her father's calm, self-assured posture, the genuine respect with which people greeted him, didn't align with the image she'd somehow constructed in her mind. It was a powerful moment, a silent clash between perception and reality. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need to shout. It simply needs to walk into the same room as a lie. Just then, the host of the evening, Henry, approached the microphone. The chatter in the room gradually faded as everyone turned their attention to him. Henry cleared his throat, a warm smile gracing his lips. Tonight, before we begin, I want to recognize a man who changed my life, he announced, his voice resonating with genuine emotion. He's the reason my company even exists today. Without him, I'd still be in debt, and this event wouldn't even be possible. Please welcome my dear friend and mentor, Mr. George Whitmore. The room erupted. A thunderous applause filled the air. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. People stood, a ripple of respect moving through the crowd. And Nathan, his face turned pure white. The color drained from him, leaving him looking utterly shocked. It was a public recognition, a testament to George's true influence, shattering Nathan's casual dismissal. George, ever the picture of modest grace, stood slowly. He gave a slight, acknowledging nod to the crowd, a gentle gesture that spoke volumes. Then, he calmly walked towards the podium. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud or boastful. It was calm, deep, and steady, the kind of tone that carried wisdom and undeniable authority. Thank you, Henry, he began, a genuine smile playing on his lips. I didn't expect this. I've always believed success isn't about what you own, but about who you help along the way. Another wave of applause swept through the room, even more heartfelt this time. George's words resonated deeply, especially in a place where success often seemed synonymous with material wealth. Emily's eyes, watching her father, filled with tears. She couldn't even bring herself to look at Nathan, who stood beside her, visibly crumbling. It was a stark lesson playing out before them. Humility in power makes arrogance look small, almost pathetic. After his brief, impactful speech, George didn't bask in the glory. Instead, Henry, beaming with pride, introduced him to several key executives and influential investors. Precisely the people Nathan had hoped to impress all evening. But these powerful individuals weren't drawn to Nathan's rehearsed charm or his carefully practiced lines. They were genuinely intrigued by George's sincerity, his wisdom, his undeniable presence. One executive, after shaking George's hand, turned to Emily and Nathan, a warm smile on his face. So you're Emily's father. She must be so proud. Exclaimed Nathan, still reeling, forced a smile onto his lips. Of course, he said, his voice stiff, betraying the turmoil within. But beneath his forced composure, his palms were sweating. The carefully constructed facade of his evening was rapidly disintegrating. A little later, George approached him. His expression was warm, as always, but his eyes held a piercing quality, a silent understanding that saw right through the surface. Emily, Nathan, he greeted them gently. Emily stammered, caught off guard. Dad, I didn't know you'd be here. Nathan, still scrambling to salvage some shred of his pride, quickly interjected, Mr. Whitmore. I didn't realize you were acquainted with Mr. Lawson. He used a formal, almost deferential tone, a stark contrast to his earlier dismissiveness. George smiled faintly, a knowing glint in his eyes. Acquainted, he repeated, his voice soft but resonant. Son, I built his first office building. He delivered the line gently, without a hint of bragging, but the words hit like a bolt of lightning, a clap of thunder in the quiet hum of the gala. The moment arrogance meets reality is always silent, but undeniably unforgettable. Nathan's composure completely cracked. His jaw went slack. I see, he mumbled, utterly defeated. Emily, tears welling up again, whispered, Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't. George, with a comforting gesture, placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't apologize, sweetheart. You're young. People show you who they are. Sometimes, that's the best gift they can give. He then turned his gaze back to Nathan, his eyes steady and unwavering. You called me a local homeless person. You judged a man by his coat, not his character. But let me tell you something. Nathan, I've been poorer in spirit and richer in love than most men you'll ever meet. So maybe, look closer next time. Nathan stood speechless, utterly humiliated. He had nothing to say. George's words were not an attack, but a quiet, powerful truth that cut deeper than any angry outburst ever could. The entire evening had been turned upside down. The investors Nathan had so desperately hoped to impress were now following George, eager to reconnect, to share stories, to simply be in his presence. Nathan's carefully cultivated arrogance had melted into sheer embarrassment right in front of everyone who mattered to him. George didn't stay much longer. He had made his point without anger, without shouting, without seeking revenge. He left quietly, gracefully, refusing to humiliate Nathan further. Just truth. And truth has its own way of settling scores. As he stepped into the cool night air, a gentle smile played on his lips. The kind of smile that comes from knowing the universe. Docent needs your help to balance things out. It just needs your patience. Revenge whispered in dignity will always echo louder than revenge screamed in rage. The next few weeks after the gala felt like a slow-motion storm for Nathan. He had walked into that grand event, expecting to leave with new deals and admiration, a hero to his father's firm. Instead, he walked out with a shame that burned beneath his skin. A wound that wouldn't heal. Every handshake he'd made that night, every flattering word he'd exchanged, now felt like a withdrawal, draining his professional capital. People who had once smiled and nodded at him now started keeping their distance. The gossip spread quickly, quietly, through boardrooms and corridors, a venomous whisper that followed him everywhere. He called George Whitmore a homeless man. The George Whitmore. It didn't take long for the phone calls to stop. Clients who had promised partnerships after the gala suddenly became unavailable. His company, already strained by overambitious projects and significant loans, began to show cracks. Nathan's arrogance had been his currency, his primary way of navigating the business world, and now it was utterly worthless. When arrogance becomes public, silence truly becomes your greatest punishment. What a powerful story, right? It just goes to show that true value, true respect, and true success are built on character, humility, and the positive impact we have on others, not on superficial appearances or boasts. George Whitmore's quiet strength and profound wisdom offered a masterclass in how to command a room without saying a word, and how to deliver a powerful lesson without raising your voice. It is a reminder for all of us to always look beyond the surface and to truly value integrity and kindness. If you remember, we left off with George, a man who faced public humiliation with grace, and his daughter Emily, caught between her husband's ambition and a simmering unease. Let's pick up Emily's journey. She was caught in a storm of her own making. Sleep felt like a distant memory, haunted by the image of her father on that stage, calm, graceful, applauded. It was a stark contrast to the man she thought she knew, the man she'd once defended in hushed tones to Nathan. Now, she saw a quiet power, a depth she'd never fully appreciated. A sharp pang of guilt gnawed at her. She remembered her hesitation, how she'd let Nathan's disdain color her view of her own father, making her reluctant to invite him to family dinners. She desperately wanted to call him. The phone felt heavy in her hand. Each time she picked it up, she'd freeze. What if he was disappointed? What if he was cold? But, deep down she knew, George wasn't that kind of man. The hardest calls, she realized, are often the ones where you fear revealing your own shame, not theirs. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? That sometimes our own discomfort holds us back from connecting with the very people who can offer solace. Then, one afternoon, Nathan came home earlier than usual. He looked utterly disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his tie half undone. Emily was by the window, lost in old family letters she'd found in her father's box, a window into a past she was just beginning to understand. Nathan threw his phone onto the couch with a frustrated sigh. "They pulled a deal," he muttered, the words heavy with defeat. "Lawson's group went with someone else. Said they didn't like how I handled myself at the gala." Emily didn't react with anger, with a chilling, distant clarity. She just looked at him. "You did this to yourself, Nathan." His brow furrowed in confusion. "Excuse me?" he asked, clearly taken aback. She stood up, her voice trembling slightly, but holding firm. "You humiliated my father, a man who built everything you're trying to buy your way into. You called him homeless. You treated him like trash. And now you're surprised the world doesn't respect you." Nathan's face flushed crimson. "Oh, come on, Emily. He looked like one. I didn't know." She cut him off, her voice gaining strength. "That's exactly it. You didn't care to know. It's true, isn't it? When truth finally speaks, arrogance rarely has a good defense." Nathan, his pride wounded, stormed off, slamming the bedroom door. But behind his anger, something else simmered. Fear. Deep down, he knew Emily was right. Fiancé, tried to build on sheer pride, was starting to crumble. And the man he'd mocked stood quietly above it all, untouched. A powerful moment of realization for Emily, and a harsh dose of reality for Nathan. Meanwhile, George's life continued its peaceful rhythm. He spent his mornings tending to his small garden, cultivating beauty and life, and his evenings lost in books by the warmth of his fireplace. It's incredible how sometimes the quietest lives hold the most profound lessons. Unexpectedly, letters began to arrive. Old business partners, curious to reconnect after hearing his name again. Charities, seeking his advice. Young architects, eager for his mentorship. George had become a symbol of integrity and resilience, a testament to what happens when you build on solid foundations. One of those letters was from a foundation dedicated to supporting underprivileged students in engineering and design. They wanted to honor him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. George accepted, not out of vanity, but because it reaffirmed a core belief. Legacy isn't built by applause, but by quiet, consistent effort. Time, he knew, always rewards those who build with intention and exposes those who build on hype. What a profound thought. It makes you reflect on what truly lasts. The award ceremony, voice thick with unshed tears. He simply smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "Emily, I owe you an apology," she confessed, her voice cracking. "For everything, for not seeing who you really are. For letting Nathan." George gently raised a hand, stopping her words. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice full of warmth. "Life teaches everyone in its own way. Don't apologize for learning." Tears streamed down her face. "You were so kind to him, Dad. I don't understand how you stayed calm when he humiliated you." He chuckled softly, a wise, knowing sound, because anger burns you faster than it burns them. "And besides, people always reveal themselves eventually. You just have to let them talk long enough." What a powerful, timeless truth. The strongest revenge, he implied, is truly needing none at all. They embraced, not like strangers tentatively reconnecting, but like family rediscovering something sacred, a bond reforged in understanding and forgiveness. The warmth between them felt like forgiveness itself, a soothing balm on old wounds. Meanwhile, Nathan's downfall was accelerating. His arrogance, once a perceived strength, had quietly accumulated enemies. Those enemies, emboldened by his public missteps, began to whisper louder. An investor, fed up with Nathan's overconfidence, exposed some of his poor decisions in the press. Within weeks, his once pristine reputation in the business community was in tatters. The very people who once lauded him now avoided his calls. He began to spiral, desperate, angry, and financially broken. In the midst of this chaos, Emily made her decision. She packed her bags. It's a powerful moment, isn't it? Sometimes, karma doesn't destroy. Sometimes, it simply gives you the courage to walk away. When Nathan came home that evening, the house was eerily quiet. On the dining table, a single note lay waiting. It read, "You wanted a life of appearances, Nathan, but I need a life of truth. My father showed me that. Don't call me. I'm staying with him for now." Nathan crumpled the paper in his shaking hands. For the first time, he felt the sting of rejection, the cold weight of loneliness, much like George had felt that day at the cafe. Grab a warm drink, get comfy, because this one's going to resonate. Our story starts with Emily. Imagine driving through the night, a long, weary journey, all the way to her father's house. When she finally arrived, there he was, George, sitting on the porch, calm as ever, sipping tea. It was Asifadi. Been expecting her. Before she could even get a word out, he simply said, "You don't have to explain, sweetheart. Just come inside. You're home." And in that moment, Emily burst into tears. It was a sound that echoed through the quiet night, a quiet cleansing, washing away pride, letting love return right where it belonged. It hit her then. Home isn't just where you live, it's where you're truly forgiven. For the first time in years, George's home was filled with a warmth that had been missing. He didn't lecture. He didn't gloat. He simply welcomed her back with open arms and a peaceful heart. As they sat there together, sipping tea under the stars, Emily realized something incredibly powerful. Her father's silence, his calm acceptance, had taught her more than Nathan's loud, self-important words ever could. It's true, isn't it? Dignity doesn't need to shout. It simply stands tall and lets time reveal the truth. The loudest lessons, often, are the ones whispered by calm, steady hearts. Now, let's talk about Nathan. The next few months for him unfolded like a brutal, endless winter. The snow arrived late that year, but the cold had already settled deep within Nathan's life long before it touched the ground. His empire, built on arrogance and bluster, had officially crumbled. Investors had pulled out, partners had vanished, and banks were circling like vultures. The grand house that once echoed with his self-importance now stood hollow and empty, save for the lonely sound of his own footsteps. He had plummeted from being the man everyone wanted to impress to the man everyone desperately avoided. The phone, which used to buzz constantly with invitations and important meetings, now sat utterly silent. Even the press, who once hung on his every word, had stopped talking about him. It was as if the world had collectively decided to just erase his name. It's a harsh truth, but when the world forgets your name, it's often because pride erased it first. Nathan spent his days desperately trying to salvage what little was left. He called old contacts, begged for meetings, even offered shares for practically nothing, but the trust was gone. No one believed him anymore. His unchecked arrogance hadn't just cost him his reputation, it had utterly destroyed his credibility. One bitter morning, as he sat in his desolate office, staring at an eviction notice on his desk, his mind drifted back to the precise moment everything began to unravel. The gala, George Esquire, knowing face, the deafening applause that followed his public exposure. He had foolishly believed that humiliation would fade away. Instead, it had clung to him, a relentless curse tied to his very reflection. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? Karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, gently, until you finally hear yourself. Meanwhile, miles away, George's life flowed with a serene, calm precision. His days were wonderfully simple. Reading the newspaper, volunteering at a local community center, and mentoring young, eager designers who reminded him so much of his own younger self. People admired his quiet humility. Some even told him how incredibly inspiring it was that a man who had once wielded so much power carried himself with such profound peace. George never felt the need to correct them. He didn't have to. Through hard experience, that the best victories are often the quietest ones, the kind that don't need to be seen or announced to be deeply felt. True victory, the kind that truly nourishes the soul, is when you can smile genuinely, knowing what you overcame, without anyone else even needing to know the full story. Emily had now comfortably settled back into her father's home. It was strange at first, she admitted, waking up to the gentle chirping of birds instead of the relentless blare of city horns, eating breakfast at the very same table where she had once done her childhood homework. But with each passing day, something deep inside her began to heal. She had consciously traded a life of superficial luxury for profound peace, and she quickly learned that peace, true peace, was worth far more than any gold. Sometimes, she'd find George in his study, lost in thought, sketching. Other times, he'd sit by the window, silently watching the lake glimmer beneath the fading evening sun. One quiet evening, Emily asked him, her voice barely above a whisper, "Dan, do you really think Nathan regrets what he did?" George took a slow, thoughtful sip of his tea before he replied, "Eventually, everyone does. But regret, without true humility, sweetheart, is just another subtle form of pride." His words hit home. Regret that doesn't lead to genuine change is truly just pride wearing a thin disguise of guilt. He was absolutely right. Across town, Nathan was drowning in exactly that kind of regret. A heavy, suffocating blanket of regret wrapped tightly in his unyielding pride. He simply couldn't bring himself to admit he had been wrong, not even to himself. He still clung to the narrative that George had set him up, that it was all just terrible bad luck, that the entire world had unfairly turned its back on him. But when he looked at himself in the mirror, he couldn't hold his own gaze. The self-deception was cracking. Then came the letter. It arrived one cold morning, tucked neatly under his front door. There was no name on the envelope, just his address written in a steady, familiar handwriting. Inside, There was a single, folded note. It simply read, "Nathan, pride builds tall walls, but no doors. When you're ready to walk through, you know where to find peace." GW, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Nathan felt something truly crack inside him. And it wasn't anger. It wasn't even humiliation. It was a deep aching realization. He sat there. He was a businessman, sure, but one blinded by pride, always blaming others, his partners, the market, even fate for his own shortcomings. He'd forgotten what true responsibility felt like, let alone what it meant to genuinely apologize. There was a moment, a raw, honest moment, when tears welled up in his eyes, uninvited but deeply real. He whispered, "You didn't deserve what I said at the cafe. You didn't deserve any of it." He was talking to George, a man he had wronged deeply, a man who had every reason to be angry. George, wise and patient, didn't jump to respond. He just nodded slowly, his gaze understanding. "Etol Nasan, you were blinded by the life you thought you wanted. I was once too. The difference is whether we let that blindness stay." Think about that for a second. How often do we let past mistakes, or the pursuit of what we think we want, blind us to what's truly important? The past can indeed blind you, but wisdom, true wisdom, teaches you to see, even in the dark. From that night on, something profound shifted in Nathan. He started helping at George's community center. No fanfare, no grand gestures, just quiet, consistent action. He swept floors, repaired broken chairs, even learned to teach basic finance to the kids. He stopped seeing himself as a fallen businessman and started seeing himself as just another man, trying to do something good with the time he had left. George never praised him loudly, never said, "You've changed." He just smiled sometimes, watching quietly as humility, that gentle, grounding force, settled into Nathan's soul. It's a powerful reminder that the best apology isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's lived, one quiet act at a time. Emily, George's daughter, had forgiven Nathan long ago, but now she could truly see him becoming someone worth forgiving. She'd occasionally join them at the center, bringing food or helping with paperwork. Sure, there were still echoes of the pain he'd caused, those awkward reminders, but they grew softer each day, replaced by something close to peace. It's amazing how healing can unfold when we commit to change. One evening, while cleaning up after a long day, Nathan stumbled upon a small photo on the wall. It was an old black and white picture of George, a younger, proud architect, standing in front of a tall building, and beneath it, in faded ink, were words that hit Nathan like a ton of bricks. "Success is measured in who you lift, not how high you stand." Full rhythm, tending his garden, writing letters, and mentoring the next generation. He no longer saw Nathan as a project or a burden. He saw him as proof that even the proudest hearts can find their way home. The road back to humanity is long, but every humble step is a victory. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves danced across the porch, George received a call. It was Nessa. "I wanted to tell you something," he said quietly. "I'm starting a new community program for men like me, who lost themselves in pride and are trying to rebuild." George smiled softly into the receiver. "That's the best news I've heard all year." There was a pause. Then Nathan added, his voice shaking with emotion, "I couldn't have done it without you, George." George replied, "Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. When someone lost comes to you, open the door." What a profound teaching. The greatest revenge isn't retribution. It's turning your pain into someone else's hope. That evening, as George stood on his porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills, he realized something profound. Revenge had never been his mission. Justice had already found its way, quietly, gracefully, and completely. What remained now was peace, the kind that only comes when you choose to forgive instead of destroy. In the end, peace truly is the only revenge that leaves no scars. Winter came softly that year, settling on the roofs like a calm blanket. For George, winter had always been a time for reflection, for writing letters to old friends and cherishing memories. But this winter felt different. There was a quiet peace in his heart, a sense that an old wound had finally closed. Some winters don't bring loneliness. They bring the closure your heart's been waiting for. This story is a powerful reminder that change is possible. Forgiveness is healing, and true success is found in lifting others. It shows us that even when we feel lost, there's always a path back to humanity, guided by grace and humility. What did you take away from Nathan and George's journey? This isn't just a tale, it's a testament to how life, in its strange and beautiful way, can heal itself if we just let go of control. Our story centers around George, a man who, like many of us, knew what it felt like to be lost, even when surrounded by what seemed like everything. For a long time, the air around him was thick with tension, unspoken regrets, and a kind of bitterness that seeped into everything. But then, something shifted. Every Sunday morning, a man named Nathan started showing up with coffee and cinnamon rolls. They'd sit by the fire, talk about life, and laugh. Not just any laugh, but the kind that washes away years of sorrow. The tension, once a suffocating blanket, simply vanished. In its place, a quiet, profound respect began to grow, the kind forged in the fires of truth and forgiveness. You see, the sweetest mornings often follow the longest nights of regret. And for George, that morning finally arrived. One afternoon, his daughter Emily came by with her little girl, George's granddaughter. This bright-eyed, fearless child ran straight to George, hugged him tight, and declared, "Grandpa, Mommy says you used to be famous." George just chuckled, a gentle sound that hadn't been heard in his home for far too long. "I used to be many things," he said, "but famous isn't one of them." Nathan was there too, standing a little awkwardly. Emily caught his eye, and in that one glance she offered him something priceless, a gentle forgiveness that whispered, "You're home now." It was a powerful moment, showing us that true forgiveness doesn't always need grand declarations. Sometimes it lives quietly in the smallest, most genuine gestures. That day, George just watched them, his daughter, his granddaughter, and Nathan, the man who had once deeply hurt him. He realized something profound. Life truly has a strange way of healing itself when you finally surrender control. He even remembered the day Nathan had called him a homeless man. And for the very first time, he didn't feel anger. He felt gratitude. Because that painful insult, that deep wound, had paradoxically started everything. It triggered the fall, yes, but also the revelation, and ultimately, the redemption. Without that initial sting, none of this incredible peace, this new family, would have existed. Sometimes, the greatest insult life throws our way actually becomes the seed of our greatest peace. That night, alone with his thoughts, George found himself reflecting on his late wife, Margaret. She'd been gone for over 2 decades, yet her loving presence still filled every corner of his home. He pulled out an old letter she'd written before she passed away. In it she had penned a simple yet profound request. "Promise me you'll keep your heart soft, no matter how hard the world becomes." George smiled softly, whispering to the empty room, "I kept my promise, my dear." It's amazing, isn't it? The promises we whisper to the dead often become the guiding stars for how we live for the living. They shape our paths in ways we can barely comprehend. As days turned into weeks, Nathan's new community program began to flourish. He named it The Second Step, a beautiful and fitting title. It was designed specifically for men who had lost everything, not due to drugs or crime, but often because of pride, greed, or a profound blindness to their own actions. The program offered vital counseling, helped with job placement, and provided mentorship. Nathan, without hesitation, insisted that George become an honorary advisor. George hesitated, unsure if he was ready. But then, Nathan said something that truly touched his soul. "You're the reason this exists, George. You showed me that people don't need punishment. They need someone to believe they can change." What a powerful realization. The best revenge story isn't about seeing someone ruined. It's about witnessing their incredible rebirth and becoming a part of it. One day, George decided to visit the center. As he walked through the hallway, he stopped, stunned. There, hanging proudly, was a large photo of himself from a community event years ago. His arms wrapped around 2 smiling kids. Below it, words Nathan had personally written, "Dignity is not about money. It's about how you treat those who have none." George stood there quietly, reading it over and over. He hadn't asked for this tribute. He hadn't even known it existed, but it filled him with something he hadn't felt in years. A deep, quiet fulfillment. His life truly had come full circle, and his values, his wisdom, were now living on, inspiring others through Nathan. That, my friends, is the kind of legacy money could never, ever buy. Legacy isn't what you leave in a bank account. It's what you leave in a soul. It's the positive impact you have on others, the ripple effect of your wisdom and kindness. Meanwhile, Emily's relationship with Nathan also began to heal, one gentle conversation at a time. She stopped seeing him as the man who had betrayed her father and started recognizing him as the man who learned how to humbly repair what he had broken. Their marriage grew quieter, simpler, but infinitely deeper. Nathan, being human, still made mistakes, still grappled with guilt sometimes, but now he faced it honestly. with humility and a desire to do better. George observed it all from afar, immensely proud, but never possessive. He didn't need credit or recognition. Watching them find their own peace, their own path forward, was more than enough. It truly shows us that the most powerful revenge isn't about vengeance, but about watching those who wronged you become better than they were, growing into the people they were always meant to be. One Sunday, a fierce storm swept through the town, the kind of heavy snow that blankets everything in a profound silence. No Tankudanti make it over that day, and George found himself alone by the fire, just like old times. As the wind howled outside, he did something he hadn't done in months. He opened his old journal and wrote, "I used to think revenge was about making others regret," he penned, his hand steady, "but now I know it's about making yourself proud." He paused, looked around his quiet, warm home, and a gentle smile touched his lips. The world outside might have been cold and chaotic, but inside, everything was calm and still. When peace finally replaces bitterness in your heart, my friends, you've already won the greatest victory of all. Later that winter, George received a letter from Nathan. Inside was an invitation to speak at the Second Step's one-year anniversary event. The letter read, "You once told me peace was the only true revenge. I think you were right. Please come and tell others what that peace feels like." George carefully folded the paper, his heart swelling with an emotion both heavy and light, the kind of feeling that tells you life has truly come full circle. Life has an incredible way of bringing the lesson back to the one who lived it first, asking them to share their wisdom. When the day of the event finally arrived, George walked into the hall. He was greeted by hundreds of faces, men and women who had lost everything, just like he once had, and were now bravely starting anew, taking their own second steps. Nathan stood on stage, a proud smile gracing his face. "This man," he announced, motioning toward George, "taught me that real strength isn't in power, it's in patience. Real wealth isn't in money, it's in mercy." The audience erupted in applause, a wave of warmth washing over George. He slowly stepped up to the microphone, his old hands trembling ever so slightly. He took a deep breath, and then, in that familiar, calm voice, he spoke. "I once met a man who called me a homeless person, but he wasn't wrong. I was homeless not without a house, but without a true place in the hearts of others. And then, one day, through unexpected kindness, life built me a home again." What an incredible journey, right? George's story reminds us that even when life throws its toughest challenges, there's always hope for healing, for forgiveness, and for finding our way back to peace. It's a tale that proves sometimes the loudest victory is the one won in silence. Our story begins in a place of deep humiliation. Imagine George, a man who had faced public scorn, his dignity stripped away by someone who should have known better. It was Kajit, homeless, dismissed, laughed at. That kind of pain cuts deep, doesn't it? It makes you want to fight back, to shout, to prove everyone wrong. But George chose a different path. Fast forward to a pivotal moment. George is speaking, not about anger or revenge, but about understanding. He looks out at a crowd, and even Nathan, the man who had caused him so much pain, is there, tears glistening. And George says something profound. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what was done. It means remembering and choosing peace anyway. That's how you win without destroying anyone. Think about that for a second. It's about remembering the hurt, acknowledging it, but consciously choosing not to let it poison you. The audience, they rose to their feet. But George didn't see it as applause for him. He saw it as applause for peace itself, for grace, for a victory that never needed to hurt anyone to feel complete. The loudest victory, indeed, won in silence. It reminds us that our strength isn't always in our shouts, but often in our stillness. Later, Nathan approaches him. "You changed my life," his voice softly. But George, with his quiet wisdom, corrects him. "No, Nathan. You changed it yourself. I just stood close enough so you wouldn't fall again." What a powerful lesson in mentorship and allowing others to find their own path to redemption. They shook hands, not as enemies, but as two men who had learned that true redemption isn't about revenge. It's about return. It's about returning to a place of wholeness, of integrity. Real revenge, George knew, is becoming the kind of person they can never hurt again. As George drove home that night, snow falling softly, he felt a sense of completion he hadn't known in years. His story, which started with humiliation, was ending with harmony. The man who once laughed at him was now carrying his values forward. His daughter had peace, his granddaughter a future, and George finally had rest. This is what it means when they say the calmest hearts belong to those who've already forgiven. He didn't even rush to clear the snow from his driveway. He just stood there, breathing in the cold air, feeling a peace that only comes when every piece of your heart finally settles into place. He realized that even the ache of rejection and the burn of humiliation had a purpose. They had shaped him into something stronger, gentler, wiser. The storm never stays forever, but it always teaches you how to walk in the snow. What resilience. What a beautiful way to see adversity. Inside, by the fire, George opened his old journal for the last time. On the final page, he wrote words that echo in our hearts. If anyone ever calls you less than who you are, let their words build your proof. You don't have to fight for respect. Just live so well that they'll have to rewrite their judgment. That was his story, his legacy, his quiet revenge. Sometimes, the most powerful story you'll ever write fits on a single page. It's about living your truth so brightly that no shadow can dim it. The next morning, his phone rang. It was Nathan. That, he said, the word coming out naturally now. I wanted to say, thank you for not giving up on me. George chuckled. I didn't do much. You just needed time. But Nathan knew better. No, you gave me something no one else ever did, a second chance to see who I could be. George just closed his eyes, letting those words sink in. In that moment, every insult, every lonely night, every time he was overlooked, it all made sense. The pain you survive today often becomes someone else's turning point tomorrow. Your struggles aren't just for you. They can light the way for others. Weeks turned into seasons. The snow melted, giving way to green fields. George took slow walks, and people who once saw him as the homeless man now greeted him with respect, some with a hint of guilt. But George never held it against him. He understood that people often see what they want to see until truth forces them to look deeper. Never chase their recognition. Let your truth do the talking. What freedom there is in that. One afternoon, a young man approached him in the park. He had been one of the guests at his daughter's engagement, one of those who laughed when George was humiliated. Estameret. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. George, with a kind smile, said, son, don't carry someone else's mistake on your conscience. Just make sure you never stay silent when you see kindness being mocked again. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It releases its hold on your future. It sets you free. As the years went on, George's story became part of local lore. Not the humiliation, but his grace, his patience, his unexpected revenge through wisdom. Nathan and Emily often joined him for dinner, their daughter's laughter filling the air. George felt immense gratitude not for the pain, but for what it created. Understanding, unity, redemption. The wounds you hide may one day heal generations you. I'd never mate. Your silent strength can ripple through time. One evening, Emily asked him, Dad, do you ever regret not fighting back? You could have exposed them, embarrassed them, but you chose silence. George smiled. Because silence doesn't demand defeat. It means I trusted time to reveal what pride tried to hide, and it always does. He took her hand and added softly, revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about making sure your peace is louder than their cruelty. What an incredible journey of resilience, grace, and inner strength. George's story reminds us that true victory isn't about crushing your opponents, but about cultivating a peace within yourself that no external force can disturb. It's about letting your life be the sermon, your actions, the argument, and your peace, the ultimate triumph. I hope this story resonated with you as much as it did with me. Imagine this. The calmest person in the room isn't usually the one who asked about to lose. It's often the one who's already won, not with a shout or a fist pump, but with a quiet, powerful inner peace. This brings me to George. One night, after a particularly challenging day, George found himself by his window, looking up at the stars, just like he always did. In that vast, endless dark, he pictured his late wife, Margaret. He imagined her smiling down, not wheat-bitty, but with pride, proud that he had kept his promise, proud that he had chosen kindness and grace, even when anger would have been so much easier, so much more tempting. He whispered into the still night air, a heartfelt confession. I did it, Margaret. I made peace. You know, it's amazing how when you finally choose to forgive, truly forgive, even the stars seem to shine a little differently. They twinkle with a newfound clarity, a gentle understanding, and maybe, just maybe, that's what true revenge really looks like. It's not about triumphing over someone in a petty squabble. It's not about a loud, flashy victory. It's about quiet restoration, a profound healing from within. It's about the moment your own story stops being defined by what others did to you. It stops being about their insults, their doubts, or their betrayals. Instead, it transforms. Your story becomes about who you became asterisk after asterisk. Those challenges, it becomes about the strength you found, the compassion you cultivated, the peace you built for yourself. George Carter's story wasn't about humiliation anymore. It evolved. It became a powerful testament to how grace, when you carry it long enough, with unwavering commitment, can turn even the cruelest insult into a crown of resilience, a crown of dignity. Let people call you names. Let them doubt you. One day, those very names, those whispers of disrespect, will echo with a profound respect for the person you've become. Because in the end, George didn't just survive the tough times. He transformed, and in that incredible transformation lay the most poetic revenge of all. A peace so complete, so radiant, that it made every single person who once doubted him, every person who treated him poorly, secretly wish they had treated him better. That's the power of choosing peace. What do you think about George's story? Have you ever experienced a moment like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this message resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more uplifting stories, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.